Good evening and welcome to Phases the Next Level. I'm your host, Valette Sunshine, and I'm so excited to be here with Miss Amber. And I appreciate you being here, Amber. Amber is here to share her story. She's had a bit of a rough life, and a lot of times when we have a rough life or we go through things, it's because of the choices we make or maybe because of something we've gone through in our lives. And so Amber's so willing to share, and I'm so excited for you. I'm glad to meet you.
Yes.
I'm glad that you were willing to come and share your story.
Yes, it was a long way,
Yeah,
but
it was.
I made it.
Yes, in the rain, right?
Yes, right.
I am so, and that's what tells me that you mean it about
Yes.
what's going on in your life today.
Yes.
Because you drove in the rain and the cold and said, I'm going to tell my story.
Mm-hmm.
And guess what? By telling your story, it heals,
Yes.
but it also helps other people
Yes.
that are scared to tell their story, right? And it's going on everywhere.
And I used to not be able to commit to anything.
Oh,
You know,
right.
and
You was like, I'm coming
and
to
I
Myrtle's,
did,
right?
yes.
Okay, so let's get started. Amber, how was your life growing up?
My life was okay. Both of my parents were in and out of prison. My aunt and uncle raised me. Home life was fine. We were just your middle class.
Yep.
I was a cheerleader and did dance and things like that, you know. My childhood was pretty okay.
So growing up was good. So there was nothing. I know a lot of times people say, well, this happened to me when I was this age, or I had to go through this. But you know, I'm like you too. I have a story. You know, and all of our stories are different. But my childhood was amazing. So
Right.
The things I went through was my choices, right?
Right.
So tell me about as you grew up and where did you start seeing the downward spiral, and it happens, you ease in it, like it doesn't happen overnight.
Oh, right.
You just start doing stuff and then eventually you're going down and down.
Yes.
So tell me about your story.
Probably when my mother was released from prison, I was 12 the second time, and I was older and had a little attitude, and I had never lived with my mom really, and so I wanted to live with my mom, and I was old enough to make that choice, and my mom was in a place where I was able to, and so I went and I moved in with my mother, and my sister and I both did, and shortly thereafter, she began to be in a place that was not suitable.
Right.
And so she went back to a halfway house, and I moved back home with my aunt and everything.
So was it your mom on drugs?
Yes,
Okay.
and just criminal
Gotcha.
things.
Okay, gotcha.
And so I moved back home, and by this point, I was kind of the little bit of the rebelling, things. When I was at my mom's, I could kind of do what I wanted. I could go to friends. I could do what I wanted. And when I got home, my aunt and uncle, they're very respectable people. And I was not allowed to do that. Grades needed to be fine, everything.
Yes.
And I became pregnant at 15.
So 15, early pregnancy.
Yes.
Okay. It happens.
And my aunt wanted me to get an abortion, and I said, "Oh, I'm not going to do that. You can't make me." And I ran to my sister's, and I hid there for 3 months. And when I finally went to my first doctor appointment, there was no heartbeat, so I had to undergo surgery and everything to have that done. And by this point, I was thought I was a full-blown adult.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Yep.
And
I'm familiar.
but my aunt was still resilient on just come home, go back to high school, come back, so I did. I came home, I went back to high school.
Is home Tulsa?
We had moved out to Owasso.
Owasso, okay.
Gotcha. Real nice house.
Yeah.
Owasso schools, everything. Really different from Tulsa schools, and I felt like I didn't really fit in. All these kids had gone to school together since they were in kindergarten, and I felt like I had really no place. Well, my mom had gotten out of the halfway house, and so I was doing weekends over there, and
With your mom?
with my mom, and I was able to do what I wanted, and I became pregnant again at 16. At this point, my boyfriend and I moved out together. I had already started using marijuana, taking Xanax, ecstasy, all those little high schooler things, drinking, partying.
Yeah.
My pregnancy was very healthy. we found a lady that would rent to us when we were 17. So I was like, oh my gosh, I'm even more of an adult.
Yeah, we're grown now.
Yes.
We got a place.
And I had my daughter. Everything was fine. And we were not able to keep that house, partying too much and everything. And once again, my aunt let me come home.
With your baby.
With my baby. My daughter's dad was, had a lot of, I think, mental instabilities. We were young.
Yes.
We were 16, 17.
Yeah.
We were young. We went through a lot. Just a lot of stuff. And him not being there and me living all the way, and of course nobody in my family liked him and everything. And so
you're back home with your aunt, and where did he go?
Just kind of living with friends.
And were you guys still together?
For a little bit.
Okay.
But then he kind of, by this point, I was just smoking marijuana a little bit and taking Xanax, and it wasn't too hardcore.
Right.
I was at home. I had to be at home every night with my baby. I didn't have a babysitter and things like that. And that was probably most of our fights was because he got to run off and do what he wanted. Well, I noticed he started really doing heavier drugs and getting more astray, and I hadn't gotten that far yet.
Right.
And my daughter was diagnosed with cancer when she was 16 months old. So that kind of brought us close again, her dad, and so then of course I kind of started going astray with him. And I wasn't able to, I was making all the wrong choices. I was neglecting my daughter's doctor's appointments. And here's my child dying, and I was choosing to get high over being there for my child and partying and wanting to be with him more than that. At the time, I didn't see it like that.
Right.
Well, eventually I needed to sign over not my rights, but my guardianship to my aunt, because she was still taking her to her appointments. And when she was taking her to her appointments and they said, oh, we can't draw blood today because you're not the guardian, I felt that I needed to do that, and I would not get off the drugs to be able to take her. I would, at the beginning I was there, she would have to do chemo and radiation. Every other week we would have to stay a week in the hospital. And I was there for about the first 6 months of it, and it all just became too much for me, I guess, trying to get high and juggling and be there for my child. My state of mind, I just couldn't do it. So I chose to leave my child with my aunt and chose to run to the drugs.
The drugs will do that.
And
it
yes,
will have, at that point you know that the drugs are controlling you and you're not in control.
And I had no remorse. At the time, I had no remorse. I didn't think it was very wrong. Oh, she's still being taken care of. It's okay. She's still being taken care of. It's not that big of a deal. I can go do what I want. She's still being taken care of. It's fine.
Selfish. It makes you selfish.
Selfish. There's no remorse. There's no feeling of it.
So then, did she?
Yeah, she did 3 years of radiation and hardcore chemo. She lost all her hair, and she was really, really sick. She had a softball-sized tumor behind her eye, and they had to do surgery. And her eye's a little different now, but you wouldn't even notice it if
okay.
you know. Yeah,
I'll take that over. And
she's 3 years in remission now, and so she's happy. God is so good.
He is so good.
And
so you go through. You signed guardianship over to your aunt. You're running the streets. You're doing what you want to do.
Yes.
And then, did you get into any trouble while you were out there? Were you?
Thank the Lord above. I've never been in any trouble.
That's good. Any abuse? Any depression?
Yes. I'd say once I found out that my daughter's dad was doing heroin and hardcore drugs, he decided to move to Florida, that's where his family lives, to get clean.
Right.
And
so he's doing heroin. What are you doing?
I at this point was very heavily addicted to Xanax.
Okay.
Very heavy. When I would not use them, when I would not take them in the morning, I would have seizures.
My gosh.
I would go to the neurologist often, and he would say, "Oh, are you sure you're not taking any illicit drugs?" And I'd say, "No." And they could never find anything wrong with my brain, but it was simply because of the drug use. And
Right.
I was too.
But you weren't going to tell him that.
I was not going to
You're
tell
not going
anybody.
to tell you that that's what's going on with me. So you knew what it was. They didn't know. Okay.
And it got to be such a health factor.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because I was having seizures every day.
My gosh.
And so I knew that I needed to get off of that, and so I started doing meth.
Okay. Total opposite.
Total opposite.
Total opposite drug. Nothing's, you don't act the same. It's totally different because Xanax are downers.
Yes, ma'am.
And then meth keeps you up. Keeps you up. So doing meth, and that's when this is where you're really hitting rock bottom now.
Well, I had started doing the meth, and then I met this boy, and he was very straightforward, clean, and everything. And he's like, I can give you a life that you can't refuse or whatever. And so I moved in with him. And
where are you at now? Where are you living?
Right now?
I mean, no, at this time.
Oh, at that time, I was bouncing around, living at my mom's apartment randomly.
Gotcha. Okay.
Just kind of bouncing around. So I moved in with him, and I quit everything. I went to nursing school. I started doing nursing school.
Yeah.
All that. CNA school, and I completed my CNA in my home health. And then one day he came home and said, "Well, I don't think it's really working out," and kicked me out.
Oh God.
Yeah. So I moved in with my grandmother, and then shortly after that, 3 months, I met my children's father now. I met him. Very, very great guy, had everything put together. By this point I was clean, but I had started using K2.
What is that?
K2 is a synthetic, basically, marijuana. It's a chemical, man-made.
So what does it look? Does it look like marijuana?
It looks like marijuana.
Okay.
It's spice. It's spice. It's been killing for years. It's been killing people. It'll make them have seizures. It'll make them go crazy.
What effects did you have on it?
Well, at the beginning.
So, let me ask you this: did it get you high like weed? Okay.
The lower the doses, because you can choose which different ones or whatever. I was just using the low ones, and by this point, I needed it to get out of bed. They say it was almost as worse than heroin. Getting off of it, you're sick. You have cold sweats. You're literally sick.
This is K2.
K2.
And
spice.
Are you smoking it like a joint?
Yes.
Okay. And if you didn't, you couldn't.
I could not function.
It was like heroin.
I could not function.
My God.
It was awful.
Never heard of that.
Well, and then I got pregnant. And trying to come off of the K2 and holding my pregnancy down was very hard. Right. But I did it. And it was very hard. Because being sick from the pregnancy and then also being sick from trying to get off of something was awful. But I did it, and my son was born. We lived at my kid's dad's grandmother's house. We both worked. We just had a little normal life, just new baby, and everything was great. And we both stayed off of the K2 after he was born for a few months.
So he was doing it too?
Yes.
Okay.
And then, because you could buy it in convenience stores. Then it started to get out in the law that it was banned.
Right.
And people were getting arrested for buying it. The convenience stores were being arrested and shut down for selling it.
Right.
But
so was it killing people?
It was killing people. It was making people do crazy things. So after I had my son, when he was about 9 months, found out I was pregnant again. And by this point, everything, I don't remember a lot around this point in time.
Because are you on K2 now or meth?
K2.
The K2 still, okay.
Just the K2.
Okay, gotcha.
Wasn't doing anything else besides the K2.
Okay.
Because that's how bad I needed it, and it was awful. And I didn't want to be pregnant because I wanted to be on drugs. I wanted to do, and it was just awful.
So did you end up having the baby?
I ended up having my second son, and he was born at 30 weeks, premature. And he was a healthy boy. He was 3 pounds, 4 ounces. Nothing wrong at the birth. He got an infection at 6 days old in his intestines, and they burst and made him go septic.
Yeah.
That was probably the hardest thing that I've, even through all the drugs and everything, that was probably the hardest thing that I'll ever have in my mind and pictured. When they call the pastor of the church to come and be with you. My aunts worked in hospitals my whole life, you know, and I used to volunteer at the hospitals and stuff, so I know that whenever they call them, the chaplain, that means that means nothing but they're needed. And I just remember going to my kid's dad. I kept going, what does he mean he can't bring him back to life? What does he mean? You know, and the doctors, I maxed out all his medications. There's nothing more I can do. I've broken his sternum, giving him CPR. There's nothing that we can do.
Little baby.
You know, they let me bathe him. They let me change his clothes. They let all of our family have an hour with him after he had passed. You know, he was in the NICU after he was born, and, you know, I never even got to hold him warm. You know, and that's one thing that sticks with me is I only got to know the coldness of his body. And, you know, I still have, like, I took everything. I have his IVs that still have his dry blood in them. I have everything.
That's hard.
Yeah.
It's tough.
You know, and after I
totally understand. I've been there.
It's, you grieve for the rest of your life. It's not a process you just go through. It's
almost
forever.
Like I told you, you almost think you're not going to bounce back from it when you lose a child that you carried and was born and they die. And so I understand that. So after he passed away, you're past this now, but it's still going to be with you, you know, forever. Where do you go from there after his passing?
Well, I was still trying to use K2, but it had become the law that anybody that was selling it was going to... So it's hard for me to find it. So that was the only reason that I think that I eventually got off of it, was because I couldn't find it anywhere. There was no such thing as of it anymore. Well, I became pregnant about a year later with my rainbow baby, my daughter. By this point, the domestic violence had kind of started.
This is the same guy? Okay.
The domestic violence had kind of started. I was stripping. And we were just smoking weed and kind of drinking randomly. Nothing too heavy. But I kind of had noticed him that he was straying away, and I never knew really what it was because I was working all the time, and he would stay home with the kids and his grandmother. And when I was 9 months pregnant, I got housing. We got our own apartment, first time, little family and everything. And then he had started talking to some of our older friends that we had personally chosen to let go because of their meth use.
And you know the story, right? You can't go around people when you're trying to get clean that's doing.
You have to change your people, places, things.
You have to change your people, places, and things. And if you don't,
it will not work.
It's not going to work. I don't care who it is. It's not going to work.
It won't. Well, then I found out that he was talking to them, and I thought that they had gotten clean, you know, whatever. And so we kind of started hanging out with him a little bit, and there was little hints and stuff that I thought that he might have been using. But I was pregnant, so I really didn't give it too much thought, because I was like, we've talked so much crap about these people, you know, like, oh, whatever, and people that we see on the streets that are like that, and we're like, oh, you know, oh my gosh, couldn't imagine. You know, we make fun of almost. Well, then after I had my daughter, I went right back to stripping, and just smoking weed, you know, well, I want to back up. Whenever I went to my first doctor appointment with my daughter, being pregnant, there's marijuana in my system. And I was going to a very good doctor, and they came at me and they said, if you come back at your 9-week appointment with marijuana in your system, your child will be born a ward of the state.
Which means you're going to have it, and we're going to take it when your baby gets here. It's going.
Yes.
Okay.
So I was like, this is just marijuana. I know children that are born on heroin and stuff, and they don't take their kid. But I was going to, I guess, a different doctor, a different whatever. And so I quit immediately. I was like, I will be darned if my kid is born a ward of the state. And so she came out. I got to have that 1 hour mommy and me time, and then I didn't get to hold her for a full 24 hours so that they could test her blood and her pee and her meconium. They wanted it all. She came back negative. And I was very proud and happy at that. But after I had her, I went right back to stripping. And I would leave my baby in a bassinet or whatever, and I would leave and I would come back after 8-hour shift. And she would have bled pee through her diaper.
Where was she?
With my kid's dad.
Okay,
but
gotcha.
he was high, playing video games the whole time.
So he's not changing her?
Nothing. And so I had to quit working because I was like, my child's not being taken care of while I'm gone. And so I knew I had started, and he had started welding school. He was not wanting to get up. Before all this, I feel like that he was getting high. He was getting up, going to school. He loved it. That's what he wanted to do. Well, then I would yell at him to get up, and then he would yell and lash back at me, and then we would fight.
So that's the domestic part.
Yes, and it was really, really, really bad. And that's why our children were we had to do 6 months of family counseling where a therapist would come to our house every week and do counseling with all of us together.
Fighting in front of the kids?
Because we were fighting in front of the children, and neighbors called. And I had to do 52 weeks of DIVIS classes.
Oh, wow.
And it taught me to not put my hands on my partner. He didn't do his classes, but he was still allowed around the children.
Was he still fighting you?
Yes.
He's still fighting you.
I got something from those DIVIS classes. I learned something from them. He didn't take his, so he didn't learn. And so I just basically became a doormat. And that's what I think what hurt me the most was the fact that I had learned something, and then it hurt even worse that I had learned something from it, and he didn't care. But so once I found out that he was actually doing meth, I was like, oh, I've tried it before. It's nothing I can't handle. And I wanted to he was leaving every day. He was leaving for days at a time. I wanted to be a part of that. I wanted to know what it was like to go over to friends' houses and and I wanted to be a part of that. And so, I started using heavily with him. It was no problem.
What about the kids?
The kids are at home with us. He, by this point, had dropped out of school. And I was just staying at home with the kids every day while he went out and, I guess, hustled to try to get money for a sack that day.
And so whenever he would do that, because you're not working, you're with the kids, did he bring it back home for you guys to get high? So is that how you were getting it, or did you start running the streets with him?
Well, at about 6 months, I had gone to his parents' house. When my daughter turned 6 months, because she was fresh newborn, I went to his parents and I had cried to them and told them the domestic violence was getting really, really bad. I would come to their house with a black eye and bruises all over. Like a lot of times, more often than not, my boss at the strip club wouldn't even let me work because I was so bruised, and makeup wouldn't cover it. And that wasn't even an eye opener. I just wanted. And
it's all about him.
Yeah.
I think whenever, with the drug use, I think it makes you blind. Like, and wherever he is, that's where you want, because that's who you're in love with, right? And so wherever he was going, that's where you wanted to be. And the drugs made you not care about anything.
Nothing.
And like all you wanted to do is be in his presence. And so what I want to know now is, where did you get to your darkest, deepest place where you said, time out? How long did it take you to get there?
My children
Because
were
how long
taken.
did you use?
My children were taken away whenever my youngest was 6 months, and then I did not stop. I'd say a year before I went to rehab, for a full year, I got down to 90 pounds.
Oh.
I was severely depressed. I was a hermit. I would not leave my bedroom.
Did you ever try to take your life?
No.
So depression didn't get you to that point?
No, I'm too much of a chicken, I guess you could say. I don't know.
Which, thank God you're a chicken.
Yeah. But I was very, very depressed.
It does, but that's what drugs do. Drugs and alcohol will cause depression.
Yeah.
And when you lose everything, especially your children, that will throw you.
And when things started getting, when I started missing birthday parties and missing visits that I only got once a week, and when I would go to visit my children, and I would just have the same love that I was given whenever I had them, that they haven't given up on me, that they still see me the exact same. You know, I didn't get to teach my daughter how to walk. I didn't get to hear her first word. I didn't change those diapers. I didn't do that. And that to me is the biggest. I remember yelling at my son whenever I would need to get high and I didn't have anything. I remember yelling at him like it was his 2-year-old self's fault.
Yeah.
And to today, I still think of that and I'm like, you know, it gives me this heart-wrenching.
It's crazy because kids love and they love
no matter
their
what,
mother, and they don't care what you've done in your life.
No matter what.
That's who is going to be in your corner. No, it doesn't matter because they love you so much. No matter about your yelling, no matter about your drug use, your stripping, none of that matters.
Yeah.
They love their mom.
Absolutely.
That's it.
And
then we can't give it back because we're talking about drugs and all that stuff. You know,
And so probably after I lived in the apartment without my kids for about 2 years, and then domestic violence was just it was so much, and my house had basically become a dope house. So people in and out stealing from me. There was a lot of criminal things that went on, and you know, it all just was coming to a head. We were being evicted, and I just woke up one morning. I was on my dirty mattress that was on the floor. My room was disgusting. I'd had dogs that had pooped all over the house and wasn't cleaning it up, and I was dirty, and I didn't have any clean towels to even take a shower, and I had no food. I was hungry. I was 90 pounds. And the one thing I did have was a phone that my sister paid for me to have because she was worried about my well-being.
To keep in touch with you.
And I messaged her and I said,
So she older than you?
She's 3 years older than I am. I messaged her and I said, will you come get me? And she said, this, if I come get you this time, because it had been many times that I would go and get clean at her house. And I even one time jumped off a second-story balcony into my baby daddy's arms because I didn't want her to hear me leave because I knew she would stop me.
Right.
And I'd been there for like 3 weeks and just gave it all away. And so she said, this is the last time. I will never come get you ever again if you don't stay this time. And he was asleep, and I packed as much belongings that I felt were necessary, that I wanted, that meant something to me, and I walked out the door. And he tried to run after me, and my sister said, I have my niece in the car. Don't try to act any kind of way. And he was like, okay. And he's just screaming at me, why don't you love me? Why don't you love me? And I'm like, because you love the dope more than this, than this. It's no longer, my children had been taken. It was literally, to me, it was no longer about the love that we had shared at one point or another. It was no longer about why don't you care about me, and all I had envisioned in my head and my brain was my kids and what I was going to do to get them back, because at that point in time there was nothing that I was doing to get my kids back, and it was only going to go more downhill, and I cannot let that happen.
That's right.
I cannot let that happen.
That there is a God in heaven.
Yes.
Who brings us to our senses in some kind of way. He's so powerful, he intervenes.
Yes.
And so at that point, is that where you started to get, you said, sister, help me.
Help me. And she was there in 30 minutes. I threw all my bags that I had in her car, and she took me to her house, and I started looking for rehab the next day.
How long did it take you?
It took me, let's see, I left on June 23rd. I went to rehab July 27th.
Okay.
A whole month, but I stayed at my sister's.
See,
I did not
that's a
leave.
scary thing, but your mind was made up.
I was made up.
Because some days an addict can wake up and say, and I'm done. and I need rehab, and then it takes forever for them to get a bed, and then they go, and now they're back, and it's hard.
I was
It's
losing
hard.
hope, but I called my mom and my sister, and I called my grandma, and I called everybody in my family, and just kept, telling them I'm getting impatient.
Yeah,
It's really hard. It's really hard.
Yeah.
And they all just were like, just be patient, Amber. Don't.
Yeah.
Just stay where you are. This is what you need. And I knew that's what I needed.
Yes.
Going to the 12, because I had started 12 and 12,
Oh,
going
okay.
once a week to individual counseling.
Oh, okay. So you could do that?
So yeah, and
Okay.
so that kind of helped
That's
me
good.
on
That was
to, we did the Odazzle, and I would call every day to see if there's
Yeah.
bed, and I wasn't going to wait for them to call me and say you got a bed.
Right.
I called Monarch, I called Rose Rock, I called all these places every day, and I'd like to say that I bugged the crap out of the intake lady at Monarch until she gave me a bed.
That's what you have to do
Because
when your
called
mind is
five.
made
I
up.
would call 5 times a day,
Yes,
and finally
you
one
meant
day
it.
she said, "All right, well, a girl just left, so I guess I'll go ahead and just give you her bed, and the list of the other
Yeah.
people will just." Because I was the
were
most,
adamant.
I was adamant about
Yeah.
it. I needed it,
That's
or I
good.
knew I would go back, because the whole time my baby daddy's calling me, and why don't you love me, and please come back.
See, and
then-
that's enough to say, okay, come get me.
Yeah.
Tell him to come get me.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because now they won't give me a bed. I'm trying to do what's right, and they're not. So
Absolutely.
And you held on.
Mhm, I held
So
on.
how long you been clean?
Today I have 4 months and 20 days.
Today?
Yes.
Yay!
4 months and 20 days.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
I go to my individual counseling. I go to about 3 NA meetings a week. I have 2 jobs, and I get up and I read my recovery Bible.
Yes.
I go to church.
Good.
I go to Celebrate Recovery.
Yes.
When I can.
Keep
and,
going. Keep
we
going.
can only keep what we have by giving it away.
That's right.
And that's why I'm here today, is just to literally, everybody's story is different.
Yes.
But in some way, the use of the drugs is all the same.
It's all the same.
And
So we got to wrap up. But what I wanted you to do is just, what would you say to someone that said, I need help, and how do you tell them, how do they break away, just really quick?
stop what you're doing and go to the your local resources. You may think that you're alone, but by making that first step, even by telling someone I need help, is what will get you there. Because once you let it be heard and be known, that is the reason, and that is the voice that someone somewhere will get you some help. You have to admit it to yourself to be able to admit it to other people, and they will help you. They will help you. No cry will be left unheard.
Well, this is good, and thanks for coming.
Thank you.
I'm glad you came,
Thank
and if
you.
you ever need me, call me.
Yes,
Okay?
thank you.
You guys, thank you for being here. Thank you to Amber. You guys say your prayers, and have a good night. Bye-bye.